All right, everyone, welcome back to the Tsunami is Coming, What Keeps Me Up at Night edition. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome a colleague from a friend's school, NHH, so Eirik Knudsen. I hope I got that more or less acceptably.
Perfect.
Thank you. Is a colleague we met quite a few years ago, and I remember it was at the beginning of this whole AI transformation. And over the years, we've had some fantastic conversations at HEC Paris, at NHH, and it's always a pleasure to talk, Eric. Thank you so much for joining me. And
Thanks for the invitation.
to you, like all of my other guests, I ask you, Eric, what keeps you up at night?
Uh, that's AI, to say it in one word. And I think there are three reasons for why AI is keeping me up at night. And the first reason is that if we look back at what has happened the last 3, 4 years, we can safely say that AI has changed absolutely nothing. The second reason is that if we look back at the same period, you can also say that AI has changed everything. And the third reason here is that this AI has changed nothing and everything is happening at the exact same time, which is like completely stunning to think about when you spend some time sitting in it. And of course, I could elaborate a bit on each of these if
So
you want.
let's, yeah, let's go with the first one. So AI has changed nothing. That's
Yeah,
controversial. Tell us more.
it is controversial, but also not. So if you or myself or anyone else working in an established organization look around
Yeah.
and compare how all our organizations look today compared to what it was a couple of years ago, it's remarkably similar. It's mostly the same people, it's mostly the same processes. The products or services have developed along the original trajectory. The systems and structures, they are mostly the same. So if we look at the impact of AI in what's close to us in most organizations, it's very, very hard to see the hype or the promises. Right. And I guess it's the same thing where you sit, Jeremy.
Well, we'll go to how it changed everything, but I think you're right. It seems that when you look at organizations, AI looks more like a tool that you want to force feed into the organization, but keep it as put business as usual, rather than rethink completely from scratch how we interact, how we organize, which might be more efficient in time, but very difficult politically and socially to organize. Is that your feeling too on why it changes nothing?
Yeah, totally. And you can look like historically on it. So there isn't really anything new about AI in the sense that we need to change in order to reap the benefits. That's like how it is with any new product that comes in and can increase our productivity. So you can take something as mundane as email.
Hmm.
It comes in and it offers a very new way that how we can communicate both internally and externally from an organization. But you can't really reap the benefits of this unless you change the processes on how you organize, how you actually work with this tool. And that's how it has been for like most of the time that you have a product, and if you want to reach the benefits of this new product, you need to change the processes around it. So you could say that this it's kind of a cliche, but it's also a truth that succeeding with AI is to succeed with transformation. And you also start to see this in reports saying that the companies that have managed to reap the most benefits are the companies that essentially have changed their workflows or processes around the capabilities that AI actually have.
Yeah, and I think this probably confirms the feeling of maybe a lot of listeners that, when I try to think about my life with AI, it's not that fundamentally different because there's something still very static in our organizations, for now, at the very least.
Yeah. And I often use this analogy from The Brave New World, the classic book by Aldous Huxley, because one thing I remember when I read that book the first time was the elevator operator.
Yeah.
So in this utopian, technologically infused society, you had flying cars and whatnot, but you also had like an elevator operator. And that was a robot, if I can't remember. No, it wasn't a robot actually, but it was like an elevator operator. But you
That's
can
an
say,
awesome metaphor. Yeah.
yeah, but you can say that what most of us are doing now with AI implementation is to give Copilot or ChatGPT to the elevator operator. We
Yeah.
have a role or a task, and we try to improve that person's productivity by giving him that tool. And it will, of course, probably lead to better elevator operations, better order of pushing the buttons, and probably can have better talking points to the people in the elevator. But the point is that the real benefits of the technology that came for the elevators is how it allowed you to reorganize the entire system around this, not how it only like improved that one role for how we used to think about it.
Yeah. It makes me
And that's
think of
like a
the
major difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It also makes me think of the dishwasher in Black Mirror episode that will give you an alert if you didn't initially pre-clean the dish before putting it in the dishwasher, right? That's the dishwasher of the future, not the one that is more performing and that will clean anything. No, absolutely. All right, so AI did not change anything, and yet you say AI did change everything. Tell us more.
Yeah, so maybe if the outcomes haven't materialized yet, if we take like a step back and look at the assumptions underlying how we think of things and what we how we do things, you will see that many of those have essentially been falsified by AI, and like new assumptions are falsified almost every day. And one of these major ones is, of course, that AI can say that what used to cost time and money, like knowledge work, and a lot of knowledge works eventually are now essentially becoming free or much, much less costly or time consuming than it was. And then if you start to think about what are the implications of that, you can't really assume that knowledge work requires time and money anymore, then things fundamentally starts to change. And you can see the traces of big things happening going forward. And I think like the most visible area where you can see this already is in software development, right? We talk about white coding, how we now can build things in minutes or hours that before required days or weeks to do. And if you think about the implications of this, other than just everyone can build things that before required experts, you can also see that this might actually reverse this causality that I talked about before, where we before always had to adjust the process to a new product. But now, when it's very quick to build products, we can start to reverse it, to think about how my company needs to build one specific process, and then we can build the products that fits our process specifically. And that's incredibly interesting because it is underlying this big discussion now of the SaaS apocalypse, because it says that maybe the one size fits all doesn't really work in a sense. But I think also if you start to play with it and try to implement it in real life, you can really see the power of this. And then I'm a professor, and thinking is what I do for a living, but I also do a lot for fun. So to give you some examples of how we have played this out in reality, then at NHH, I'm in charge of the mandatory bachelor course with 450 students. And in that course, we have full day workshops, 3 of them during a semester, just like the standard executive workshop, but with 450 students. And this spring, I had a problem because the day I was supposed to give the first full day workshop, then I was also supposed to be on the stage for a big keynote at a different venue. So what did we do then? Yeah, then me and a colleague, we sat down and then we built an AI system that led all these students through a full day workshop, 6 hours, completely run by an AI system. So that was a product that we built tailored to that one specific process that I wanted for that one specific workshop and this one specific course at NHH, which is absolutely mind-blowing. And it worked really well, and the impact was great. But I think like this reversal of logic is what really sticks with me, and how that can change so much going forward.
Eric, what I'm hearing, and to try to bridge both, the world of business, the world of academia, to use a sentence you used, how do you think in this world? I'm kind of hearing this idea that, as you said, knowledge is free. In my field, I'm very impressed by, open intelligence that is basically giving you a very accurate view of any place in the world. Again, thanks to AI and that the democratization of AI and apps being built all over the place. I do try to train MBAs and business students as well. It kind of feels that now the problem is not knowledge, they will know it. The problem is, how do you frame a problem? How do you ask
Mm.
better questions? That has direct implications for how you prompt an AI, right? But it also has direct implications for giving this world a little bit of a sense of purpose where that sense of purpose seems to be disappearing. Does that echo with your experience?
It's totally on point. And in talks, I often say that we are in the same problem as we saw in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Right, you
Mm,
had a society that had everything, and then they came up with a deep thought computer to find the one thing that were missing. They ended up with 42. They got the answer to the ultimate question. But it didn't really matter because they didn't really understand the question, right?
mm,
And I think we can say the same thing with us, that technologists, they have provided us with the answer. So AI, we know that it can be the answer to so many questions, but we haven't really formulated the question. So we haven't really pinpointed the problems where AI can be a good solution. And I think the challenge, we're like business schools like HSC and NHH
mm.
have a role to play in this, is that the people who are best assigned to ask the good questions are not necessarily the technologists. It's the people closest to the problems and closest to the frontiers and the leaders in companies and so forth. So totally align with you on that one.
Yeah, and it goes back to data scientist that is going to look like someone very different going down the line, probably with a good appreciation of social sciences rather than just pure data, as you said. AI changes nothing, AI changes everything. And the third point was, and those two things happen at the same time. What does
They
that
happen
mean?
at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's like the weird period that we are looking in. And you can also trace this back to like the classic technology strategy and how technology develops back to Clapper and Tushman and company, Utterback, where you have these like parallel worlds happening at the same time in the ferment period of technology. And you will see that today, and it's very classic in any technology. But I think like a big difference now is that this is felt more on an individual level also. So if you have a person who has leaned into AI, worked with Claude Code, have felt on their body what they can actually do in an hour now, that before you had like a drawer full of ideas, then you had to select one of them because it takes time to realize. Now you can actually pursue so many more of these ideas at the same time. So you have one group of people who have felt that the opportunity cost of their time have dramatically changed, while people still sitting on the fence, not doing anything, or haven't really felt this eye opening, they have a more classic, traditional opportunity cost of time. And then you have these people on individual levels, companies on like firm levels, and how these coexist creates like a very interesting tension, because at some point it is difficult for the people who haven't bought into this to continue saying that, no, I tried ChatGPT and it hallucinated my answer, or I could have
right.
answered it better. When you have someone else who have rejected that assumption long time ago and has propelled ahead. So, and that's also gonna, you see it now with Block doing major changes in their organization and the philosophy of how they organize the entire company. So this creates like an external push also for established companies that want to just sit and wait it out and figuring it out. So this tension that sits at the center of these two things happening in parallel, I think will be like a force of a lot of change going forward.
But Eric, this sounds incredibly fascinating but terrifying at the same time because as you were speaking, I was thinking to myself, this not going to be exactly what we're describing as the two groups of the have and the have-nots? Yesterday it was more in terms of skills and globalization. Now it's basically that ability to use AI meaningfully going down the line. Uh, how does this end? I hate to put you on the spot with a question that's so hard to answer, but is this basically the image we have of very, very fractured societies going down the line, or are you more hopeful?
So you can say that every day I become more optimistic on one dimension, then I become
Okay.
more pessimistic on the other dimension,
Yeah.
and you're like leaning this into a pessimistic direction. So let me start there. So what makes me a bit pessimistic is, of course, that changing social systems and at a big scale or smaller scale, that is very time consuming. So in this adjustment period, a lot of bad things can essentially happen. So if you think something as mundane as people using AI to apply for jobs, so you have apps now you can go online and pay $50 a month, and it auto applies to 1,000 jobs for you. So the reason why we haven't really seen the impacts of this is probably because not that many people use it. But
Yeah.
what will happen then when every job in the society gets 50,000 applications? We don't have a system to cater for this. It breaks it down, right? And then how are we going to select on these people? So we need to rethink fundamentally then how we think about things. So, and you can do the same logic with so many other areas in our society, that if this fundamental assumption that like time, knowledge, work, effort requires time or money or costs breaks down, then I'm not sure we have or our systems can handle it if it's adopted at a scale. These things. So that makes me a bit pessimistic, and it's also pessimistic on how long time it takes to reskill people, because everything that an AI can do well will, of course, you get a very attractive substitute for having a human doing it. But it moves like the value of humans over to providing a unique perspective or a unique taste or something human, if you will. The issue is, of course, that again our society hasn't built around that uniqueness of people's perspective. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile, for example, there isn't really nothing in there that tells you why my wife wanted to marry me, right?
Mm,
She didn't marry my CV, but that's how we think about it
yeah.
in the business life. So tomorrow, more of what makes me me will be important for me to be selected over someone else. But we don't have the systems for this. And
Yeah,
in this
exactly.
adjustment period, I'm not sure how it will
A-
play out, right?
And we're going to have to work on our own individual branding and what we bring to the table, which was always true to some extent, I guess, but not to this extent that you're describing.
Yeah, and then if everyone is going to do like the two of us to write our own Substacks and put our perspective out there, and everyone is doing, that's also going to be a pretty crowded market, right? For the market
Exactly.
for perspective.
And it's
Uh,
already a little bit crowded when you think about
it
it
is
already.
it is pretty crowded.
Eric, this was absolutely fascinating. I hope you come again,
Yeah,
and
my
I hope to
pleasure.
see you very soon. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everyone. And see you next week for the next episode.
Thank you.